Hi there, how you doing? This is Charles Kelly. Unemployment in the UK last year, at the end of last year, was almost as a record low in terms of percentages, and the amount of people in work was at a record high. So people in work reached a record high. In fact, I did an episode on it, which was all great news. Then we had the Boris bounce that the economy was going to take off again, and they were going to boost the north and do all these sorts of things. And then, of course, we were hit with the coronavirus. And at that time, stock markets and property prices were kind of at an all-time high almost. And everything was going great. And then this coronavirus came along and everything changed. And I'm not sure that things are going to get back to where they were ever again. But now we're at this situation where, despite the furlough scheme, 650,000 people have lost their jobs even with the furlough scheme. So unemployment now has gone from like 1.3 million at the end of last year up to more than 2 million now. And some predict, the OBR, the Office for Budget Responsibility, predicts that unless there is a rapid recovery, which I don't see, that we could reach 4 million unemployed, and that the rate of unemployment could go from just over 3% up to 8% to where it was in 2008. So that's the situation. And yet people are still buying shares, people are still buying property. Why is that? Why are people rushing out and buying houses? Well, I think part of the reason is that there's a lot of pent-up demand for property. People who may have been planning to move in January want to get that finished. So, they're just going out and doing it because sometimes, people have to move. They've got a growing family, or, they're in a flat where the landlord wants it back. They need something and they've got their deposit saved. So they think, well, I'm just going to go out and buy it. And fair enough, because your main residence shouldn't be treated as your main source of wealth, your main asset, because at the end of the day you're living there all that time. It's costing you money to keep it, and eventually you might sell it, but you still need somewhere to live. Unless you're one of these people that I knew that used to move into a house, an old ramshackle house, and then do it up, and then move to another and do the same thing over and over again. I'm not sure everyone wants to do that. I think some people would say, well, I'm going to move. I don't care whether the price of that property goes down or goes up over the years. I still have somewhere to live. And that kind of makes sense because, it's usually cheaper to buy a property, especially when interest rates are this low, than it is to rent a property. I'm looking at, say a typical property not far from me would rent for £1,600 a month. Well, you could buy that property for maybe less than £500,000 at the moment, and as long as you've got some sort of deposit to put down, the mortgage on that wouldn't cost more than the rent. In fact, if you borrowed all of it, if you borrowed all of 500,000 at say 2%, that's 10,000 a year, plus maybe a bit of repayment in the early years as well. It's hardly going to reach, and you're not going to borrow all of it anyway. It's hardly going to reach what you would be paying if you were renting it. So that's why it's nearly always been more attractive to buy than it has been to rent. That's the situation. People need somewhere to live, and maybe that's why there's this pent-up demand and people have gone out and bought properties. Also, a lot of people might feel that they're okay. That there's millions of people who've got fairly secure jobs. Probably half the people in the UK work for the government in one way or another, work for the public sector. I mean, you may not work directly for the government, but you may work for a quango, you may work for a hospital, you may work in teaching. And those jobs are pretty much secure. They're almost like gold-plated jobs with gold-plated pensions. They're not like the jobs where, they can come and go and banks closing down branches and retail and that sort of thing. They're very highly volatile. A lot of people are in jobs that are fine. So it just goes to show you that even in the recession and a depression, some people will still carry on and do well and think, well, I'm not in a depression, I'm not in a recession, nothing's going wrong, I'm okay. I've seen it myself. I've seen through several recessions over the decades, and some people come out of it and think, well, I'm okay, because their main source of income, their cash flow, if you like, keeps coming in, and therefore they're not worried. So they'll probably go out and buy houses and sell houses. I've also heard that houses are selling very fast, and people I know have put houses on the market even as much as £650,000, and it's sold within 4 days, and that was someone I know very well. And the other thing is that there seems to be a bit of a shortage of properties. That the properties that people want are not in high supply. They're in short supply, so maybe that's kept prices high because when there's a shortage of property and people are scrambling to buy, then you can get nearer to the asking price as possible. But it does in some ways it still to me defies logic because we're looking at the furlough scheme where 9.5 million people are on this furlough scheme at the moment, and that's going to start to taper off at the end of next month. Instead of paying 80% of their salary, the government will only pay 60%, and then companies are going to say, oh, well, I was getting 80%, I could live with that, but 60%? Now, what's going to happen there? They're either going to start cutting back, or they will start making redundancies, and then we're going to see, if that happens and it becomes like a domino effect, you get a few people lose their job there, and then they stop spending in their local economy, so that affects other jobs. In the long run, it is like a domino effect. If you in some cities and some towns, they depend on one employer. One employer is supporting the whole of that local economy. It could be a car plant, it could be a big factory, it could be anything. But that one employer kind of supports the whole area because the people who work for that big factory go and spend money in other businesses and shops, and maybe there are other businesses that supply that big factory or supply that car maker in that area. So if that one place goes, or they make 5,000 redundancies, then it has a massive effect on the economy, and that causes other people to lose their jobs, and it's a spiral. It's a downward spiral, in other words. So I've got no doubt that this could happen unless we see a speedy recovery. And are we going to see a speedy recovery? Well, not in all sectors, no. I go out now and I see people walking around the street spending a bit of money, but there is evidence to show that people are not spending money that fast, that they're holding in some money, and that's going to affect the GDP of the country. And why not? I would be holding money. I'm not going to go out and splash out and buy silly things. I would want to hold savings, and that's what I've advised people to do. Hold your savings because you might need them if you lose your job, or your salary goes down, or whatever happens, And I certainly wouldn't be increasing the size of my credit card debt at the moment. I'd be paying off credit card debt and trying to, batten down the hatches for the storm that I believe will come. I'm sure that the virus is not yet over. It could come back again, and it has done in America. And you might think, well, that's in America, so who cares about Donald Trump and America and that sort of thing? But it does affect everyone. It affects the whole world's economy. If the largest economy in the world is suffering and going down, it will affect us because it just has a knock-on effect. Companies here sell to America. If they can't sell to America, one of their biggest markets, then it will affect things here, and it will affect jobs here. There's an old saying that if America sneezes, the rest of the world gets a cold, and that I'm sure that's true. The other thing we've got going on is this growing war between America and China, and now Britain and China. That's going to have an effect. We've got Brexit coming up as well, by the way, and we're looking around and we're falling out with China. America's not certain at the moment. It's all very precarious, and that's why I wouldn't be, particularly if I was a first-time buyer, for instance. Particularly if I was a first-time buyer, I'd kind of be holding out because I think, okay, you might miss out on a small price rise, but it may be that you come up at you could buy it next year at even lower than this year's prices. That's my. You've got to take your own view on it. You've got to decide what you want to do. If you need a place to live, just go and buy it. I'd say, if you need a place to live and you've got your savings there, and you got your mortgage, then just buy it. Because that's your home. It's not an investment. It's not a buy-to-let property. It's your home, and you shouldn't be confused with thinking that a home is your investment. There's an old saying by Robert Kiyosaki, who wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad, the famous book series Rich Dad, Poor Dad. If you haven't read it and you want to get into property, I would read that. It's a classic book. And one of the things he said was that your house, when you're doing a balance sheet, and you shouldn't put your house on a balance sheet as an asset. You should put it on the liability side, because it takes money out of your pocket. He said an asset is something that puts money in your pocket, and a liability is something that takes money out of your pocket, like a car, for instance. And that sort of perplexed me for a while. How can that be? Of course, your home is an asset, but in some ways it's not an asset. I mean, in a way, it is an asset, because most of people's money is tied up in that property. But in terms of being a home, in a way, if you buy your home and next year it's gone down in value, and we're obsessed with homes and houses and values here, and you're saying well, what did that property down the road sell for? And they say, it's sold for X amount. You say, oh, my house has gone down in value. But so what? What does it matter that your house is worth 200,000 today, and maybe 180 tomorrow, or 250 tomorrow? If you're living there, it doesn't matter, does it? As long as your mortgage is covered and you're not getting into negative equity, and even if you're in negative equity, as long as you're paying your mortgage, it's not usually a big problem for a homeowner. So what? Yeah, it might have gone up in value, and you think, great, it's gone up in value, but then when you go to buy your next property, that's gone up in value as well anyway. So therefore, unless you're moving from, say, central London, and you're moving to Devon or something, and central London shot up in price, it doesn't make a whole heap of difference. So if you have to buy your home, you have to buy your home, and maybe that's what a lot of people are deciding to do. But otherwise, I certainly wouldn't be buying any, say, investment properties, for instance, at the moment, unless something really blindingly obvious came up and said that this has got to be bought. But I would be very careful. It's not to say you can't make money in property at the moment, because there will be opportunities, and I'm sure there are opportunities right now, and people will be buying properties. Offices, for instance, I think a lot of offices are going to become redundant. I've heard today that RBS might be considering putting tens of thousands of people permanently working from home. So what's going to happen to their offices? And I believe that some of the banks may even close branches down. They've been looking to close branches down for quite a while, and now they've got the ideal excuse. Coronavirus. I've got the card now, the Corona card. I can do what I like. So that could happen. And I know of other companies planning to put people working from home. They've got the technology to do it. Suddenly the technology is there, like it wasn't there last year. Suddenly it's there, and people can work from home. But it also brings you one step closer. If you're working from home in this country, then they can get people working from home in the Philippines and India, maybe at cheaper rates than they can pay you. So that's it's another worrying thing. Artificial intelligence, robotics, all of this new technology that's coming out, driverless cars, it's all coming, and that will affect tens of thousands, if not millions, of jobs. So until we get into a situation where these people can be re-employed, retrained, I think it's going to be a precarious and difficult couple of years ahead of us. So my view, if you're worried yourself, then maybe it's time to learn a new skill. Maybe learn how to make money online. Maybe learn how to make money in property without using your own money. You can make money sourcing properties. You can make money finding deals for other people. You can make money on rent to rent, where you rent a property and let it out to people at a higher rate, maybe by rooms. There's lots of ways of making money in property without actually buying it and putting your own money down. So if you'd like to know more about how you can make money from home, just drop me a line, charles@charleskelly.net, or on Facebook Messenger or whatever. I'm sure you can find me if you need to. And then we'll see what happens over the next couple of months when this furlough scheme starts to taper off and ends in October. And in fact, the Chancellor has been criticised. They said he's dumping people. But then he said, well, hold on a second. We've supported 9.5 million people, almost paying their whole salary. And the cost of this has now reached nearly 200 billion, and estimates say that there will be a cost of the whole coronavirus thing, including borrowing and debt that the government's taking on, will reach 300 billion by the end of the year, which is unprecedented amounts of money, and that's going to have to be paid back somehow through higher taxes or through just long-term borrowing that our grandchildren will be paying in years to come. 300 billion. Think what a billion is. If you were a billionaire, you'd never have to. You could buy yachts and live the high life for the rest of your life. You'd never run out of money, would you? There's only, a few hundred or maybe 1,000 billionaires in the whole world. And we're talking about 300 of those, 300 billion that has been spent by just the UK alone. And in America, it's already reaching trillions. And what does that do? I mean, if you keep printing more money and issuing bonds and that sort of thing, what does it do to the value of that money? Well, obviously, it devalues the value of that money. The buying power of that money and the spending power of that money dissipates over the years. It diminishes over years because the government is just printing this paper fiat money that is not backed by anything. It's just paper money. They can just print this money, and so that's what you got. So in some ways, if you're just sitting on cash you can't just sit on cash forever. In some ways, you've got to be able to invest that into assets that will protect you against inflation. But that's another subject. So thanks for listening, and have a great evening, everybody. And of course, thanks for everyone who's tuning in on Facebook Live. Vix, there, great to see you. I hope your book is going okay. I don't know if you finished your book. I'm still doing the final edit on a new book that I've got coming out called Borrow and Grow Rich, how people have got rich by borrowing money but using good debt, not bad debt. And actually that comes from another thing from Rich Dad Poor Dad. There is good debt and there is bad debt. Have you ever thought about that? Not all debt is bad. Some debt is good debt. Sorry about that. And thanks to Monica. She said, wonderful. She said to me, wonderful. Have a wonderful evening. Yeah, great. Thanks very much. Productive time. Good to speak to you. Monica is in the medical recruitment. She recruits physiotherapists from her base and doing very well. Great to speak. Vic's not yet finished yet. And thanks for your comments. My book is nearly finished. It's just that edit, I had to pay someone to do an edit for me because it was I just couldn't look at it anymore. But hopefully it will be out some stage this year, and that's called Borrow and Grow Rich, and I'll be talking about that as we go on and making some special offer on that. So thanks for listening. Thanks Vix and Monica and all the people on Facebook Live. Great to see you. I do welcome your comments. Great to see you. Bye for now.